Hey everyone, we're going to jump right into this video as well, just like the last one. Here we're starting off with drilling the holes for the bridge. I'm using a drill block right there to make sure that all of my holes are straight. I do not want them wavering. When I did the pink guitar, I did not use a drill block. I just drilled straight through, and they looked fine on the top, but in the back they ended up being curved. So they did not. It does not look good on the back. But with this drill block, it keeps everything exactly where it should be, and then when I drill through the body, we don't have any issues. I keep going back to check the bridge because I want to make sure that I get every hole exactly where it needs to be. It is extremely important for the bridge to be in the correct place. I decided not to put it on the template. I wanted to just do it straight on the guitar, so it took me a little bit longer doing it that way. And I'll probably put the holes on the template at some point, um, at least the next time before I use it, if I am using that type of bridge. Now we are going to take the material out for the control cavity. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do this, and I opted for a chisel for a lot of it once I got a lot of the material out with the Forstner bit here. Now I could have done a control cavity that's more standard. I have some templates that I made for them for other guitars that I could just throw down and then route it out if I wanted to. But I was trying to match the aesthetic of the guitar, so I decided, hey, we're going to make a control cavity that is going to have a backplate that looks like bricks. I'm going to put little brackets in here, and that's how the plate is going to go on. I might suspend them by magnets. I'm not entirely sure right now. The chiseling went pretty well, and then I realized I only needed to chisel about halfway down, and I could then just take the router and run it around. So uh, at first I was trying to chisel the whole thing all nice and clean the whole way down, and then I realized once I could just get it to where the bearing would go along the line I wanted it to go on, just throw the router in there, and then I could clean up the corners because obviously the router bits are curved and they're not going to get everything in the corners. There we have a nice shot of it being relatively cleaned out. Doing a little bit more routing right there just to clean it up as much as I can. And I still need to go back through and chisel away some of the glue and some other things. We're going to be putting cavity paint on there. Now we're measuring the width of the headstock. I actually needed to do a ton of sanding here. I made that way too thick. I did not have a pickup cavity template for a 7 string, So I took the 6-string one and measured it out and made my own 7-string template, which is what I was just doing there. Now we're doing a little bit of chiseling, trying to get the truss rod to fit. Even though the router worked just fine for the majority of it, the part where it goes in by the headstock is thicker and deeper, so I need to chisel that out. You can't really use a router bit over there. I mean, I could try to freehand it, but there's too much that can go wrong if I do. So the chisel is a lot more precise, so it just takes a little bit more time. I always hate this part of the neck. Trying to drill precisely into the cavity where your truss rod is at is not an easy task. I always start vertical to get a little hole going, and then I will slowly increase my angle. Once I have a pilot hole, I'll use a center point drill bit that you're seeing here. In the past, I've worked my way up with bits. I've started with the smaller ones and then slowly worked my way to the larger ones to make sure I am getting the bits exactly where I want them to go. This time, I just went to the largest bit that I was going to use, and I went for it. One thing that almost happened here is I almost went through the top, and it wasn't necessarily anything I could have prevented. That is a sharp drill bit. It's one of my best drill bits. I even started the drill in reverse prior to having it go the normal direction and cutting through fast. But it worked out pretty well. It's very cold outside, so I do not want to sit at the workbench and try to map out my fret spacing at 9 in the morning, so I'm doing this inside. I've got my headlamp on so that I can see. It's very hard to see pencil on this wood, so I needed as much light as I possibly could get. Basically what I'm doing is I'm making 3 marks exactly where I want them to be, and then I'm connecting them for my fret line. I have to be extremely precise here. I even marked the 12th fret so that I can measure from the nut to the 12th fret, and then I'm measuring all of these from one another, and when I meet up with the 12th fret, it should be exact. If it's not, that means I messed up somewhere and I need to go back and figure out where my spacing was off. Doing it that way, as you can see, I did a little erasing right there. Doing it that way allows me to basically double check my work. And you can kind of see the pencil lines. That's why I was wearing the headlamp. It's very difficult to see what you're marking. But I got them all out. Everything measured up from the nut as it was supposed to, all the way up through the 24th fret, so I'm happy with how it looks. Now I'm ready to cut the fret slots. In addition to using a miter box there, I put tape This is straight line tape. I put that right around the mark so that it kind of acts as an extra guide for my saw, and I can make sure that I'm exactly where I want it to be. The other thing is if I happen to slip a little bit, it's going to take off a layer of the tape rather than taking off a layer of the wood. So it protects my fretboard a little bit. Now, obviously, I can't hack into it, but if I slip, I'm okay. All right, now we're putting the fretboard onto the neck. I've put all the glue on. I have locator pins. I should have actually taken them out after I clamped everything down. I did not, but I was still able to get them out with pliers. I'm using radius blocks there to clamp everything to kind of distribute the pressure along the edges, make sure that I have a nice fit. You can never have too many clamps. I thought I had more than enough clamps for this, and I still could have probably put on a couple more just to be safe. But it was just fine the way I had it with the amount of clamps that I did. This is probably one of the better fretboard gluing jobs I've done. I think it also is in part to being able to plane the fretboard rather than sand it prior to putting it on. As you can see, lots of clamps, but it's looking pretty good. We're going to let that dry for a while. And now we're going to drill out the pickup cavities. So we remove the material first, and then bring in the router and finish cleaning it all out. One thing to note is I did not make this template, this pickup template, quite big enough. So I ended up having to go back in after I got the pickups and widening the edge just a little bit. It was easy to do. Basically, all I did was I put the template back down and I just moved it very slightly towards the bottom, and then I did that side, and then I did the exact same to the top. It was not even a millimeter total that I had to widen it. So it worked out okay. But I've corrected the template now, so when I use it in the future, it should be precise the first time. But that's what happens when you have to make templates. And when you don't have the pickups on hand, I used measurements that I found online. I thought I got it pretty close. I decided that it was better if it were too small than too big, because I can always take out more material. It's very hard to replace material once you've taken it out. So the fact that it was too small was not big. It was not a big issue. We were able to extend that, and there you can see they look pretty good. Almost forgot to drill out the ferrules for the strings, since this is a string through body. And I actually start the holes by drilling in reverse to try to avoid any tear out. I think you can see right here. Yep, I'm drilling in reverse right there. It gets it started and it carves away that first little layer. You can see right there. Now that it's started, I can go and just drill normally. And it does doing it that way has helped prevent a lot of tear out, and I get pretty nice clean holes. Even if you have sharp drill bits, you can still tear out. So doing it in reverse helps avoid that. Now we're drilling out the holes for the controls. switch, volume, and the tone. I didn't actually have a big enough center point drill bit, so I had to file out the holes, which you're seeing right there. I have bigger drill bits, but they're not as good as these center point drill bits. And since I'm drilling from the front of the guitar, I do not want any blemishes right there. So if I have to drill them, if I have to drill the holes small, that's okay. I can just widen them out with a file. And I almost forgot to put in the gut cut, and so I drew it out right there. And now we're using the angle grinder. Unlike the neck from earlier, I did not mess this up. Always draw your lines on so that you know where you're going to. Do your best to not go over the lines. If you do go over the lines, it's usually somewhat correctable, so it's not a huge deal. Now we're using the orbital sander. The first guitar I built, I did not have the luxury of using this. I ended up sanding the entire thing by hand after I used the angle grinder, and that took many hours. This tore through everything very fast. Now we're on to the input hole. I'm using a 7/8 Forstner bit there. Now I'm just cutting the excess off of the fretboard since it has dried. Now we're back to sanding the body. There was lots of glue still on there from when I glued the two halves together. As you can see, the one brick by where the neck attaches is actually thinner than the rest of them. So I actually had to go back and do some extra work there. The reason I left that one thin was to kind of act as a cutaway almost. How you on other guitars you'll make that area thinner to make it easier to access the higher part of the neck. So that's kind of what I went with there, and I felt like it fit the aesthetic. And then I also have a little thinner piece there at the very back corner where the point is at. You can see that one's a little bit thinner. So I did that for an aesthetic. I could have planed the entire guitar down more to match that, but I did not want to do that. I wanted some things to be a little almost off, but intentionally so, for the look, since we're doing a theme of a brick wall. A little bit more sanding around the edges. I think with this one I'm actually using a higher grit paper for the spindle sander, basically just to smooth it out and get it ready for staining. I wanted to have the whole thing sanded down, and then I was going to work on where the mortar is going to go for the bricks. Alright, now we're finally to the point where I am carving out all of the cavities for the mortar in between the bricks. I use straight line tape, and I'm using my little Dremel-like tool there with a carving bit on it. And the tape is my guide, and it worked really well, helping me stay on point. Just freehanding it, even though there are already lines in between all of the wood pieces that you can clearly see. Having the tape really helped me keep everything straight. It's a lot harder without the tape on there. And if I go over a little bit, it kind of tears into the tape, similar to when I was cutting the frets earlier. This took hours, and you're not going to see a whole lot of it, but once I got the back done horizontally, I then realized, oh, I have to do it all vertically, and then I had to do the edges of the guitar as well, and of course the front. There you can see what it looks like. It looks like bricks. Now we're going to cut out the holes where the neck bolts are going to go in. I'm checking the depth. Basically, I've got some little ferrules that the bolts are going to go into. Very common with a lot of Ibanez guitars. Very common with a lot of guitars in general, but I did not want to use a backplate there, especially because of the thinner brick there where the neck connects. I didn't have a bit big enough. I got as close as I could, and then I just sanded out everything to make it wide enough to fit the ferrules in. Now we're testing them. I still need to go wider, so I sanded a little bit more. And there we are working on the edges of the guitar. I probably spent about 6 hours, maybe less, about 6 hours carving out all of those little lines, cleaning them out, making it precise. It's amazing how these little details just add so much time to your project. Alright, we're going to wrap this video up here. Next, we're going to actually see it turn into bricks. We're going to see how it actually looks, if it actually turns out the way I want it to and the way I see it in my head. And then we're going to do some more work on the neck. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.